Hey, I got a question for you. Have you ever found yourself in the position where you had to love someone who was difficult? Listen, we've all been there before. Maybe you're there right now. I don't know if it's a coworker, a spouse, maybe even a child, or even an older parent. Maybe it's your neighbor. But guess what? We are all called to love, and not just some people, but everybody. In this episode, we're going to look at the scriptures and we're going to identify some of the pathways and patterns that God teaches us through the scriptures about how to love those who challenge us the most. I'm so glad you're here. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and grab your free PDF down in the description box below. Let's dive in. So, the Bible teaches us about Christ insisting and emphatically insisting that we love other people. In fact, we learn in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 through 48, where Jesus calls us to love our enemies. And he also insists that we bless those who curse us. I know it's audacious. It's mind-blowing, it's mind-boggling, yet it is a command of the Savior. He teaches us that the divine love that he gives to us should transcend and be given to all other human beings. You see, God's love is impartial. God's love is unconditional, and that's the type of love that you and I are required to give to other people. Yes, even the difficult ones. So let's talk about that for a minute. What really is a good depiction of a difficult person? Well, we could define difficult people by a number of ways, but let's use nice words. How about that? So, first of all, there's the antagonists. That's those who are constantly provoking some kind of conflict all of the time. Do you know people like that? They're not happy unless everybody else is unhappy. That's an antagonist who's always trying to start something. Well, those are people we have to love too. Then there's another category of difficult people I like to call the explosive. That's those who react with outbursts of tempers. They have temper tantrums and they just kind of lose it just like that. Doesn't take much for them to explode. You know anybody like that? It's not you, is it? Hope not. So there's also another category of people that may be a little difficult to love sometime, and that's called the dismissive. So the dismissive is a description of those people who ignore or invalidate your feelings. So they do all they can to destroy the validity of your feelings. And there's nothing like a dismissive person better to invalidate you or to present you with challenges or even to test and try your patience and your capacity to love, and even really to literally test your relationship with God. But guess what? We still have to love, even the difficult. We have a great example of what that looks like in Jesus Christ, because Jesus is our ultimate example for loving. Remember his words in Luke 23:34, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. Now, it almost seems as if he made an error there to say that they didn't know what they were doing. Did they know that they were mocking the Son of God? Did they know that they were literally going up against God in the flesh? I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to is that there are times that people will give you difficulty or a hard time or even challenge you, and literally they're not even thinking about you. They're thinking about their own trauma and unresolved drama. And so people who are hurting find ways to pass their hurt on and cause hurt in other people. So when we look at Jesus's words, we do know that they were trying to prove something. We do know that they were trying to look like big men as they persecuted Jesus along with the other two male factors. And so perhaps when he says they don't know what they're doing, maybe he was giving them room for grace and space. That's the example that Jesus gives to us as to how we should be with other people. And so in Jesus's words in Luke 23, we find his example of loving his enemies was unconditional. And not only was it unconditional, but it was also words of forgiveness. So you and I have to be unconditional in our love for our quote unquote enemies or those who come against us. And we have to understand the fact, friends, that even in agony, even when it's causing you pain, we are still required to love, yes, even the difficult people. Jesus literally embodied forgiveness. He really showed us forgiveness in the purest forms. As they are tormenting him, he prays to God on their behalf and asks God to give them grace and space that they may get it together. How much more effective would your life and my life be if we were to pray that same prayer when we're dealing with difficult people? God, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they are. They don't know the expanse of what it is that they're walking up on or what it is that they're creating or the havoc that they're creating in my life. So, God, I'm going to put them in your hands. And I want you to take care of them and forgive them and give them space and grace to change. I think that would really be a prayer God would love to answer if we were to, in fact, pray it. Well, let's look at another example of love of an enemy, quote unquote. And that's found in the story of the Good Samaritan. That is a powerful story in Luke chapter 10, verse 25 through 37, because the Samaritan helps out a wounded stranger. And the Samaritan himself was considered the enemy, as the other man who had been wounded, left for dead, stripped and robbed and all of that was a Jew. And Jews and Samaritans had no dealings with each other. In fact, a priest who was a Jew sees the man laying there, wounded, stripped, bruised, beaten, battered, and left for dead, and passes by on the other side of the street. A Levite, which would be one of the workers in the church that would help out with worship, also sees his fellow Jew lying there, stripped, naked, beaten, robbed, and left for dead, and also goes to the other side of the street. But the Samaritan comes along and sees him and goes to him and ministers to him, although he is viewed as an enemy of the Jewish people. That's what love looks like. That's what it's like to love difficult people. Because from this story, we learn compassion. He showed compassion without any hesitation. And he also shows us that when we love difficult people, we have to do it unconditionally. So he transcends social barriers, he transcends ethnic barriers, and he doesn't allow his difference of ethnicity or even how he is viewed because of his difference in ethnicity to impact what he was willing to do for another fellow human being. Now, think about how difficult that was, because the Jericho Road was known for being a place where people were often hurt and damaged and robbed and killed and all of that. So it intensified the level of difficulty in the story, because not only is this man ethnically looked down upon, this man is also in a difficult situation because, unlike the priest and the Levite, he was not looking out for his own welfare. He could have been robbed. But because he saw another man in need, regardless to the color, ethnicity, or even preferences of the man, he did what he could to help him, because When we are dealing with difficult situations, we are required to have love that is unconditional. And the Samaritan challenges our prejudices, teaches us to love those that are deemed as different from the rest. Matter of fact, you may be different from the rest, but don't you want unconditional love? Well, that's the lesson in the story of the Good Samaritan is loving unconditionally, regardless to the circumstances. That's how you love difficult people. But let's talk about another great example of loving difficult people. And this is one of the best ones in the Bible. It's the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. Genesis 37, all the way to Genesis chapter 50, tells the story of Joseph and how he was a dreamer, how God used him, God gave him dreams, yet his brothers were jealous of him, and his father continued to give him coats of many colors because he saw a bright and vibrant future that Joseph would have. When we look at Genesis 45, verse 4 through 15, it really is a great illustration of how profound forgiveness truly is. Because Joseph forgave brothers who sold him into slavery, left him for dead in a pit, and yet his story shows us what it's like to love difficult people. And I love how Genesis ends with Joseph's words, what you meant for evil, God has now turned it around to make it good. And even though they sowed seeds of discord in Joseph's life, they reaped the harvest that came from the seeds that they sowed because he was able to feed them. Because remember, there's a famine in the land, and the only place to get food was in Egypt. And the only person you could get food from as a stranger was Mr. Joseph. So Joseph loved them even when they didn't know if he was still alive. He loved them even when they didn't know it was him that was about to feed them. So that's a great example of loving difficult people. And we all have to do that sometimes. And so those are lessons that we need to learn about what we must do. Now, it's also important that we learn to pray for those who hurt us. Jesus talked about that in the model prayer in Matthew chapter 6. But we also need to release bitterness. You cannot hold on to bitterness with your brother and have righteousness with your Heavenly Father. So we've got to let go of bitterness. And we also, in doing so, praying for others helps us to invite healing. Praying for others opens up our heart to God. Praying for those who hurt us is a powerful thing because it softens hearts. It eases divine healing into our lives. And prayer transforms our entire perspective. That's something that I want to encourage you to do is pray for those who've done you wrong, those who are difficult to love in your life. But I want to give you another very practical tip in this study, and that is that you also need to set some healthy boundaries. Set some healthy boundaries. Well, what does that consist of? Protecting your heart, defining the limits, and communicating clearly. Now, Proverbs 4:23 urges us to guard our hearts. You see, healthy boundaries protect our emotional well-being, and they allow us to love without enabling harm. So protecting your heart means that you guard your heart, that you do not make your heart susceptible to repeat damage, yet you love the person. It's kind of like not allowing the person to drive your car who has wrecked it 4 times, but allowing them to ride in your car. So love is kind of like that. Love does not open up itself to repeat damage. No, you should guard your heart. but you should also make space in your heart for those in your life, even the difficult family and relatives in your life. But setting healthy boundaries also means defining limits. So there are times that you have to say, I can only talk to cousin so and so for this amount of time, or I can only stand to be around this person for this amount of time because my tolerance is low. And by 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or whatever it is, they're going to start up that pattern that really puts me in the wrong place. So it's a healthy boundary when you establish limits. So for some of you, that may mean that when you go to the family reunion, you're going to stay an hour. Or it may also mean that you're going to take an accountability partner with you who can pull you out of a ditch before you really get into it. You know what I mean? That's really important because you, again, want to guard your heart. And then thirdly, it's important to set healthy boundaries by communicating clearly. Many of us run from difficult conversations with difficult people because we feel like we will not get through, we will not be heard, and it's going to turn out bad. But some of the most difficult conversations that I've put off for some time, once I prayed and got up the gumption and the notion to take care of that, it was a breeze. It was nothing like what I thought it was going to be like. And I realized all the time that I wasted in fear because I didn't want to deal with it head on. I want to challenge you to pray and even to fast if you are dealing with some difficult people and some challenging times in your life right now, and you're afraid to talk through it or afraid to talk to them about it. Pray about it first. Talk to God about it first. But understand the necessity of setting healthy boundaries and understanding the need to have defined limits and to communicate clearly. That's really, really, really important. So, one of the other important aspects of this lesson is for us to understand the power of empathy. Now, sympathy is, I feel so bad for you in the loss of your job, the loss of your relative. Empathy is different. Empathy says, I hurt along with you. I feel your pain, and I am here to be of assistance to you, whatever way I can serve. That's really what empathy is when you put yourself in the other person's shoes or the other person's situation. Romans 12 and 15, Paul teaches us, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. And really, he was trying to help us to understand that empathy bridges divides. When we rejoice, sharing the victories with others, also when we cry with others, it bridges divides. And there's no time like either a happy moment in life or a sad moment in life, a celebration or a sad moment in life, to really bridge a divide with people who are difficult. And that's what Paul is teaching us there in Romans 12 and 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice and be there with them in their celebrations. Mourn with those who mourn and be there with them for their sadness. Because empathy has a way of building bridges rather than burning bridges. You see, empathy and showing empathy to people who are difficult can sometimes connect you deeper with them. You know, I've been a pastor for 29 years. I know I don't look that old, but 29 years. And I have pastored churches, of course, where they existed before I was born. And with every church I've ever walked into, there was always people who were excited about me being there as their new pastor and people who were not excited because they wanted somebody else or they had some preconceptions about me for whatever reason. But one thing I found is that those who rejected or were not in favor of me, if they stayed around long enough, they were going to have either something to celebrate or something to be sad about. And it was always after those moments that I had a chance to love on them through either celebration or sadness, that they came around to see this is who God sent in my life to be my shepherd, to help me walk through this life. Now, I still got some members now who I'm not their pastor, and I'm totally okay with that. You know why? It's because I understand that some people are still so broken from life that they don't allow anyone else to come in, even if God has sent them to them. But I love them anyway. And when we understand the difficulty, even in ministry, of trying to love people who are still clinging to someone who's now with the Lord or still clinging to the way things used to be, that's difficult. That's difficult. Yet, we have to be there for people and celebrate with those who celebrate and have sorrow with those who sorrow, because empathy builds a bridge rather than burning a bridge. And I'm evidence that empathy can literally transform a relationship. So when we understand the power of empathy, we then can understand what it means to respond with kindness. So Romans 12:20 and 21 shows us what to do when we find ourselves dealing with difficult people who are not nice to us. Overcome evil with good. You know why? Kindness diffuses hostility. It reflects Christ's nature. So I want to give you some really practical teachings here to help you really employ what I'm talking about. Offer a compliment. That's a way to respond with kindness. Maybe you see someone who you're having some difficulties with. Find something to bridge that gap with. And there's nothing like a compliment to make a person feel good. I mean, of course, be genuine, but to make a person feel good and connected with. There's something great about everybody. Even a clock that is broken is right at least 2 times a day. So complimenting them is a way to build a bridge and relationship. Listen actively to them and show respect to them. You know why? Kindness has a way of breaking down walls and opening up doors to reconciliation. Why? Because it reflects the love of God. Responding with kindness is transformative because kindness breaks down walls. It opens doors for reconciliation, and it reflects the love of God. Well, hey, I hope you've gotten a lot out of this brief and simple teaching on loving difficult people. Hey, don't forget, down in the description box below is a free PDF handout that will give you full study notes so you can take this deeper and do some personal study. You'll find questions there that will help you take a deeper dive into the scriptures as you apply the teaching to your life. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. See you next time.